Hey, Gavin Steele here, taking you through one of Fabio's Abdesidu Abducted by Design tutorials. Well, I'm really excited to take you through this cool frilly bits typography tutorial because the outcome is absolutely outstanding, and I've been a great fan of Fabio's tutorials. And don't forget, you can check out all of the tutorials over his website, abdesidu.com. And this is the kind of image that we're aiming for in the end. So hopefully I'll be able to explain some of the steps along the way. All of the files that you need are linked to within the tutorial. I've got some of those websites open just here where you can download some of the free textures. That you'll need for this particular tutorial. So let's get started. I've already done some work in Photoshop, but I'm going to take you through that right now. So I'm just going to zoom in here to about 100%. Scroll to the right. Okay. So I've added some font and I've typed in the name of the website, Abdesidu. You might want to change it. You can see the font that I've used up at the top, and I've set it to medium and 156 points. So that feature of font is really nice and simple. And then on that font layer, I've just added a gradient overlay, and it's a really simple gradient overlay. Ooh, let's cancel that. It goes from a red, which is E10019, to a yellow, which is FFF000, green, which is 00601B, and finally to a blue, which is OD78F1. Now the thing to watch out for here is your positioning of the colours themselves. If I just move this down a second, you can see that as I've created these colours, I've done it in such a way that my first letter is a solid colour, and then the colours blend across to the middle where I get a solid yellow, and again they blend across to the blue, so I get a solid blue at the end. And that gives me a start, middle and end, and everything else in between is faded. And that's going to become important when we add our vector shapes in 1 second, the actual ornaments themselves. So that's what I did with the text. You can see I've got all of these layers up here inside this group, this folder called logo, and if I bring them back, you can see how everything takes shape. Okay, I'm going to take you through adding the ornaments for the first shape and then show you what I did differently for the ones that have a fade or a gradient going from one colour to the other. So I'm just going to turn those off for the time being, and then we'll pop them back on once we go through the tutorial. I've also got a textures folder, and again I'll take you through loading these textures in and the effects we're going to put on them. And I've got a black layer just for when I was creating this particular font and this particular text. So I'm going to head over to Illustrator, where I've already downloaded the same pack that was downloaded in the tutorial. You can check out the links over the website. I'm going to select this command copy, and I'm just going to take it straight into Photoshop, turn off that black layer, and I'm just going to paste it straight in as a smart object. Let's move that over. Let's just delete it 1 second, and we're going to do it right here. Okay, so all I did was I pasted that into the wrong layer. So I've pasted that in, and I'm just going to play around with the size. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to flip it horizontally because I want it to come out to the left from the A. And then I'm going to put it into place. So that looks okay. Just going to play around that a little bit more. Maybe just nudge it down to the left. Okay, and then I'm going to hit return. I've got it in place. Now you're going to follow the same process with each of the little ornaments that you're going to add for the letters. So first thing you need to do, double click on the layer, add a drop shadow, and we're going to set that to multiply, 100, minus 60, 5 for distance, 5 for size, and click on OK. Then what you're going to do is you're going to control click on the effects themselves, and then you're going to come down to create a layer, and that's going to create a layer of just the shadow. So we've separated the shadow from the actual vector shape itself. We're going to go back to our vector shape, double click on it one more time, and we're going to select color overlay. we're going to choose the eyedropper and we're going to take it from the letter itself. Click on OK and OK. Go back down to that shadow layer, go to Layer Mask, Reveal All, choose the brush tool, set it to about 45 with 0% hardness, and what we're going to do is we're going to mask out this area here. So it's going to look like the ornament is growing from the A. Now as it comes back on itself, it's going to have a little bit of shadow. So make sure you're on the little white box over here to the right, and we're just going to click and take away some of that shadow. And all I'm doing is just clicking on the shape. Okay. Now you can see already that it's starting to look like it's coming from the A. So I might just take, if I just decrease the size of that brush. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And that's how you go through the process for each letter. Okay, you drag the vector in, you paste it as a smart object, you create the drop shadow, you separate the drop shadow into its own layer, then you add the color by selecting the color that's already on the letter. Now I'm just going to reveal all of the other little elements and little ornaments that we've got on here, and I'm just going to show you what I did differently for those colors that go from one shade to a lighter shade, or from a lighter shade to a darker shade. So on the smart object, instead of adding a color overlay, I added a gradient overlay. And to get the colors required for the gradient overlay, I just used the eyedropper and I just selected the color to the left hand side of the letter, and then clicked on OK, and again over on the right I just selected the color from the right hand side. So hopefully we get a gradient that goes from this color all the way across to this color over here, and it kind of works. It's not perfect, but you get a much better effect than if you just did a plain color overlay. Click on OK, and you can see as well that I masked out on each of those layers just a little bit to make it look like it's actually coming from the letter itself. Now I left out the E here because I didn't want it to be too cluttered in the middle, and the ornament that I used for the Z was quite big and covered the U. So that's all of my ornaments and my letters exactly how I want them. You can play around with them, add as many as you want, increase the size, decrease the size, obviously play around with fonts until you get something that you're happy with. I then grouped everything together into that folder called logo, and I'm just going to add this font layer straight in there. Make sure that that sits right at the bottom. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to add these textures. So I'm just going to delete the ones I've got there, and then inside that folder I'm going to bring in our first texture. And the first one we need is this Vintage 10 from the pack that Fabio links to on the tutorial, and I'm just going to left click and drag that straight in. Okay, it looks great, but it doesn't actually quite fit the size of the canvas. So what I'm going to do is hold down Alt and just drag to the right. Now this won't be exactly perfect. If I let go there, you can hardly see there's a join there, and you could spend time cloning it, or you could just use a slightly smaller canvas. It doesn't really matter. You do get slight repeat, but actually it doesn't look too bad. Hold down Shift, and I'm just going to merge those layers together. So that's the first texture layer, and all we need to do for that layer is play around with its hue and saturation. So load up the tool, click on Colorize, and then we're going to play around with some of these settings. So we can set the first one to 49, the saturation to 19, and the lightness to plus 35, and then click on OK. We're then going to add our second texture, which is texture 2 from this pack. Again, click and drag that on. Now with this one I'm going to use the free transform. I'm just going to increase the size like so, enter. And again, we're going to play around with the hue and saturation. So go to Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. We're going to change that to +2, -41, and -75. And then we're just going to click on OK. Now you notice I didn't click on the colorize there. Click on OK, and we're going to change that to overlay. Okay, you can just see that coming through. It looks quite nice. Just breaks up that pattern a little bit. And finally, we're going to add some old paper. Again, the link for these files are over on the tutorial itself. Just going to throw that right in there. Maybe just move it around a little bit until you get something that you're happy with. And then all we're going to do with that is set that to color burn. Okay, we're starting to get our background there, so just going to zoom in a little bit and move to the right. Okay, so that looks like a really old, worn and torn background. You can see the line comes down from the D, not too distracting, and our ornaments all look really good too. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. We're going to duplicate, and we're going to create layers from, and so forth. So I'm going to go through each of these steps and make sure you follow each one as we go along. So the first thing to do is we're going to select the logo group and we're going to merge that layer. So control click, merge the group, and you can see it puts that group onto its own layer. Next thing you need to do is go to layer styles. We're going to add a drop shadow to that. We're going to set this to color burn. We're going to increase that to 100, -65 for distance, 5 for speed, and click on OK. Then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our texture group. So just drag that, let's make sure we got it selected, drag that down, and we've duplicated that. And then we're going to change the paper layer to overlay. So we go straight in, change that to overlay. Okay. Then what we need to do is merge that group. Okay. Merge the group, and again it creates a new layer of all of those layers pasted together. Okay, so once you've done that, the next step is we're going to put that new text layer on top of our logo, like so. Make sure it's set to overlay. Okay, and then we're going to create a clipping mask. So we're going to go to layer, create clipping mask, and then we're going to duplicate that layer, but we're going to make sure that we do that within the clipping mask. So drag that straight down on here, and you can see that it's within the clipping mask itself. And the new one we're going to make sure is an overlay, and we can change that one, sorry, to multiply. And you can see it really makes that lettering feel part of the background. So we're going to group all of that together, our logo and those two. Let's just grab them all a second. Okay, and we're going to group them together. My mistake. Let's duplicate down to the new folder, and we've just grouped that together. Now with that group, call it logo, we are going to, with that particular group selected, we're going to duplicate it, and then we're going to merge that. You can see it's getting a little bit complicated here, and then we're going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, set it to 4.5 pixels, and then we're going to set that to screen. Okay, and we're going to reduce it down to about 80%. Okay, so that's basically the tutorial. The things to play around with there are when you're creating your vector shapes, increase the size, playing around with some of these layers, some of these properties. Again, we can lighten that up, put that as overlay as well, and you could really play around with that, but you lose a little bit of the texture over some of the actual elements themselves and the ornaments. But overall, I'm really happy with that, and it's really excited to bring you that tutorial because it's one of the better tutorials out there. And check out more of the tutorials over at Fabio's brilliant website, abdulzidu.com. Abducted by Design. There are loads and loads of brilliant tutorials for you to play around with. You can check them all out there. And I'm Gavin Steele, and I hope you've enjoyed creating this tutorial and this brilliant font with me. Thanks very much.